Ben Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Pritchard. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I congratulate the Honourable Member for Coventry South for securing this really important debate. A pleasure also to follow my honourable friend from Stoke North, Kidsgrove and Talk. Make sure you get all of them in, or it tells you off. His passion for this subject is visible for all of us to see. I thank him for his kind words about my own advocacy around education. You'll be pleased to hear I'll be significantly briefer than he was, though, Mr. Pritchard. But he managed to talk for 20 minutes, and still I agree with every single thing that he said, so I'm grateful that he has done. First, to say that I never intended to be here. If anyone's ever listened to any after-dinner speech I've given, they will know that I never wanted to be an MP, I always wanted to be a teacher. And that was my intention all the way from primary school, in fact. And it's only by pure accident that I've ended up in this place instead. Absolutely clear to me that education should be the biggest priority of any government. And I've always said that if I had just £1, I would put it into schools. That would be my first priority. And I have the privilege also of sitting on the Education Select Committee under the chairmanship of the Minister, and I know his passion for education too. I've been in this place many times advocating around teacher recruitment and retention in particular. I think my honourable friend from Stoke is absolutely right when he says that workload is so important and often overlooked. We talk about pay, we always talk about pay, but actually most of the teachers I speak to recognise that we have some of the shortest school days in Europe, but some of the longest teachers' working hours, and that can't be right, and there must be something that we can do to reduce that workload and give teachers back the autonomy and the ability to be in the classroom and to teach instead of doing paperwork and data. Must be an absolute priority for the Minister. I wanted to highlight some of the positive progress in my constituency, because there has been positive progress, Mr. Pritchard, and particularly positive trajectory around the number of schools that are now good rated. We didn't have, I think we could, certainly could count them on one hand in terms of secondary schools prior to my election in 2017, but we have made good progress, and I think we've had a government agenda on education that benefits constituencies like mine, not least this shift towards technical vocational qualifications, towards what I call often cultural capital, as opposed to just the academic. It will take time to embed that in our schools and our education systems. But so often, it's the most disadvantaged children who just don't have that life experience to be able to achieve more, to be able to be ambitious and to be able to understand all of their options and opportunities in life. So I'm grateful that Ofsted have started to shift slowly in that direction as well. And I'm grateful for the early years funding budget that was increased in the budget earlier this year, because it's not just our education system, not just schools and colleges, right? It starts right from day one in a child's life, and our early years provision in particular, and I would think of some of the most disadvantaged estates in my Mansfield constituency, it's that early years provision that is absolutely key to making sure that children have a fair shot in life. The Chancellor confirmed in the autumn statement that schools will receive an extra £2 billion over the next 2 years. School budgets rising by £3.5 billion next year. That's massive, Mr. Pritchard. It's absolutely massive. And it shows this Labour rhetoric around school cuts. It does wind me up because it suggests that language, school cuts, and the websites with the misleading figures and all the rest of it, suggests that somebody in government has taken a decision to go, no, we're not going to give money to schools anymore. And that could not be further than the truth. My honourable friend from Stoke listed the figures. I think it was 60-odd% increase in education budgets since 2010. There has never been more money in our education system, and it is not fair to suggest that government ministers have decided to cut schools. It's very, very different to be able to say, look, we can't keep up with 12% inflation when our public services are massively squeezed. That is not a school cut, and that is not a decision by government ministers to take money away from schools. And even that intention, the difference in that intention, Mr. Pritchard, is really important in our public conversation, to sit and suggest that Conservative ministers aren't willing to put money into our schools and aren't willing to invest in our schools is just not true. Ashfield and Mansfield are, as my honourable friend pointed out, education investment areas with an aim to improve outcomes in our parts of the country where literacy and numeracy are unfortunately the poorest. I think there are 11 local authorities in the Midlands that are part of that programme. And more funding locally is good. I guess my question on that to the Minister and my driver for government is that I think local autonomy is always best on how that funding is spent. I'm conscious that some of that funding in my constituency has been spent on structures, has been spent on supporting the governance of academy trusts and things like that. I'd love to see it in classrooms. I'd love to see it given to schools for teachers and heads to use at their discretion. I always feel that that is the most effective way to spend school funding. I'm pleased then that there is local autonomy in those new budget uplifts. Mansfield's getting just over £3 million in extra funding for schools in the next academic year as part of that £2 billion uplift. Those first payments, I think, are landing this week, which is excellent news. And schools will have the freedom to choose how to spend that money, whether that is extra staffing, whether that is better pay, or whatever it may be. But it should be for schools to decide that. That's always been my view. Significant investment in my part of the world also in the capital side of it, whether that is school buildings and facilities. Over £13 billion invested since 2015. Now, we're always playing catch-up because we have a very old school estate around much of the country. I've always found it incredibly frustrating when I've taken some of the most difficult examples to the DfE. They've said, you think that's bad? Go and have a look at X down the road. There are so many examples, and that is frustrating. But there is significant capital investment in around the country in our school estate. And in December, I was delighted that 3 Mansfield schools were selected among the 239 to be rebuilt or substantially refurbished. The Meaden School, Garibaldi School and All Saints Academy. Again, brilliant news. I would urge the government and particularly the DfE to help us accelerate that programme. The sooner we can get that investment visible and there on the ground, the better. I know that I've spoken to those schools about those plans and they are good to go. They are ready. They are putting in planning permission, and as soon as they get the word from the DfE, they'll start to build. But that's so important for students and for communities, not just because of the state of some of those buildings as they are now, and not just because actually of the new classrooms, but that feeling that somebody is investing in a community, particularly areas of significant disadvantage, to be able to look at that outcome, and they are levelling up outcomes, Mr Pritchard, to be able to say, look, somebody has put millions of pounds into my community and into my children and into their futures. That's so meaningful and powerful for communities. It will be a demonstration, I think, of a commitment to Mansfield and to communities like it. In recent local elections, I spoke to a lot of people on the doorsteps who said, look, there's lots of conversations about this stuff. I hear about these figures. Show me the buildings, show me the outcomes. That's what we need to achieve by the next election, Mr Speaker, in order to bring forward and to grow that confidence in our communities to be able to support us for another term. Let's get those schools built. Across Nottinghamshire, we've got 2 more primary schools opening in September, new extensions and secondary places at existing schools, funded in no small part by central government. I'm also grateful for that support on energy through this difficult economic challenge. £500 million shared out for energy efficiency measures too. My honourable friend from Stoke again mentioned facilities, and particularly sports facilities. I've been a huge advocate for opening up school facilities to the communities. Our schools aren't just education providers, they are hubs of our communities, particularly primary schools, I think, where engaging parents in education at that age is so, so important. And being able to have access, often in many estates, I think of estates in my own constituency, the school and the school fields are the only provision that exists in terms of sports fields and other community buildings. So let's get them open as many hours as we possibly can. Let's get partners in there, let's get councils in there and community groups in there, delivering more on evenings and weekends. Let's get those taxpayer-funded facilities used absolutely to their maximum. And I'm grateful for some of the additional funding that's come forward for that. Finally, Mr Pritchard, I mentioned direction of travel, particularly on skills, technical and vocational education. I am a massive believer in work-based learning. I'm a massive believer that there, for many people, technical vocational qualifications, apprenticeships and other similar types of qualifications will be far better than university in terms of outcomes and life opportunities. The key thing for many students in my constituency is choice and is having the right information to be able to help people get the best outcomes. Again, the Skills Bill started to drive things in the right direction in terms of getting more careers advice into schools, getting third-party organisations into schools, and that is hugely important. But also in Mansfield, I want to highlight the good work of West Notts College in particular. When I became the Member of Parliament 6 years ago now, it was in financial trouble, it was really struggling, and under new leadership, it has grown and developed and become an incredible asset for our community. It's important to recognise the good work of Andrew Cropley in all of that, the principal at the college, who has turned a failing college into, as I say, a huge asset to our community, not just to our young people in terms of learning and what they deliver, and opening the facilities there up to the community, I should say, as well, but also in terms of our wider investment and regeneration work. Andrew leads the Place Board as well, delivering on things like Levelling Up Fund and Towns Fund outcomes. It's become a centre of the growth and change in our community. It's also become a university campus campus, which is game-changing for young people in my constituency. If you, in the past, and the figures a few years out of date now, pre-COVID, but it was the case that only 11% of people in Mansfield went to university. And typically when that was true, the people didn't come back. They went to university somewhere else and very often never returned to Mansfield. And that's hugely damaging to our economy, but to our culture and our fabric as well, because and it has massive wide-reaching implications. I lead a council. It means there's nobody there to look after older people either. It's hugely problematic. And actually by providing that education locally, and not just by setting up a University of North West Mansfield delivering junk qualifications that aren't going to get people anywhere, but working with Nottingham Trent University, award-winning university on a campus locally, people can earn and learn, get on, do HE in Mansfield, stay and work in Mansfield. And we're building pathways from school through college into higher education qualifications on the same campus to go and work at the hospital next door. Those opportunities are amazing and are game-changing for the pathways for young people in my community. And I think both Andrew and Edward Peck at Nottingham Trent University for his commitment and investment in Mansfield deserve a lot of credit for that. I do think that's hugely important. The college has had significant capital investment as well as that NTU presence, which means better access. We're also delivering new centres for advanced manufacturing automation and training for aerospace roles in Newark, just down the road, Mansfield Knowledge Exchange for investment and training in STEM and innovation through the Levelling Up and Towns Fund. So it's not just DFE funding that is going towards these outcomes, but actually that wider range of government support through levelling up. All of this, I've not even had a chance to talk about things like lifelong learning and the change that will deliver for many people in Mansfield, combined with opportunities for jobs and growth, things like Step Fusion, £20 billion government investment in creating jobs in clean energy in my constituency, kind of jobs and opportunities that haven't existed since the pitch shut, quite frankly, in decades. Means that in the future, I am really confident that young people in primary school in Mansfield now are going to have better opportunities than their parents had and that their grandparents had. And that's hugely important in that levelling up agenda. I think we all recognise, Mr Pritchard, in summary, that there are significant economic challenges right now, that everybody in this room, I'm sure, would say, if you've got that pound, as I said at the beginning, put it into schools, put it into our young people. That's the future. That's the opportunities that we need to deliver for them. That's not always easy, and we have to balance in all of that all the other services we deliver. I see myself as a local authority leader trying to deliver both children's services, which is my passion and the thing that I want to work on and deliver, and adult social care, and sort the roads out, and all the other things, that these are not easy equations. But it's clear from those figures, Mr Pritchard, that government has sought to support schools and invest in schools. I hope I've highlighted some of the positive examples of things that are going on in my constituency. I know that the Minister agrees with me on that, making education and making our schools and colleges a huge priority for the government. So I look forward to working with him to deliver on that. And I just urge him again, when it comes to some of these projects, capital builds and things in particular, where we've got things that are there and we've announced it, we've announced the money, we've got 18 months to get those things built in our communities. I hope the DFE will help to drive forward those outcomes and help to accelerate things like the School Rebuilding Fund and not put barriers in the way of schools in delivering those. That's going to be hugely important for us as we get into the second half of the government's administration. Thank you.